Explain a little bit about, without getting into any one of the current situations, explain a little bit as to how you think about the national strategic defense implications of Bitcoin itself from like a U.S. perspective.
Well, this is where it comes down to this conversation that we talked about earlier. Software is tricky. Everything about software is hard. It's invisible. Correct. It's inherently unintuitive. It's complex and confusing. The size and complexity of software scales to the point where it can have infinite states. It's like Proteus. It can take any shape and it can run through, like every time a software runs a new subroutine, it's technically a wholly different thing. And you can have thousands of subroutines in a single piece of software. Two people can have two different abstractions and both be correct when they describe the form and function of software. Remember, because these are just abstractions. Like software is only a set of instructions that tells a discrete state machine what to do. So if you call it gold, but I call it a gun, neither of us are technically incorrect. More importantly, software can perform two functions at once. Okay, so I get accused all the time of being a hammer that looks at Bitcoin like it's a nail.
Mm-hmm.
And but the implication being, well, obviously it's a monetary system. So the screwdrivers are calling it a screw, the hammer's calling it a nail, and people don't understand that it can be both things at once at the same time. It's software. That's just how
it is both things at once.
Well, you remember your question was about explaining the national strategic implications of Bitcoin. If you want to understand it, don't look at the software. Look at the hardware piece. Look at the thing that everyone can see. Okay, this is how you describe the national strategic implications of Bitcoin. This is how you explain why there is no replacement for Bitcoin. Both animals and people have been trying to search for a substitute for this. Humans have been doing it for 200,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a way to defend their property more effectively. And by the way, the more energy you use, the better your defense is. That's why you don't want to take a knife to a gunfight. Energy is good. The power that you project, the more powerful a hunk of metal is that defends your property, that protects it against denial of service attacks, is good. And by the way, this allows you to actually physically stop an attacker, a denial of service attacker. It's not just a deterrence like proof of stake. This is ability to physically stop the attacker.
So when you think of that, or go ahead, continue.
So my goal from the very beginning when talking to policymakers, this is what's super frustrating. Like I said, I'm an astronautical engineer in the Space Force and a U.S. National Defense Fellow at MIT. My job, what you pay me for, is to understand what this form will be in the future and to posture this country to make sure that we have the most powerful thing, that we're not taking a knife to a gunfight in the future. And so it's super frustrating when people are talking to me about Bitcoin as if it's strictly a financial system or strictly a monetary network and acting like me, that I'm not qualified to be talking about this kind of stuff. And it's also super frustrating to watch a bunch of bankers, a bunch of business people, a bunch of finance people try to explain it, because then they get confused and then they say, oh, it's the digital version of this. And it's like, you could have a PhD in economics and not understand the socio-technical implications of this. In fact, most of them don't, right? And then, or they'll go, well, okay, it's digital energy. You see, we take a state machine and we digitally partition it across a distributed ledger. And the people who are allowed to write on it are the ones that find the knots. And it's like miners searching for gold. And then we act surprised when a bunch of people get freaking confused about what you're doing. Or if you treat it strictly as a property, they're going to say, what makes Bitcoin different? What makes Bitcoin different than any other type of digital property or digital asset out there? So my goal is to just take this complex technology and boil it down to something that anyone with no background can understand, and then make informed policy decisions on it. Because if you treat it like a digital version of this, your policy is going to look very different than the digital version of this. Because if you think it's just digital property, then you might say, okay, well, maybe it's a threat to USD hegemony or this or that. But if you realize that this is the future of warfare, what happens when we scale this up? And it's not just me, but now it's an entire army of people. What do we call that?
War.
It's called war. Okay. Nations live and die and are created and are uncreated by their ability to understand what form this will take and to be good at that game in the future. This is how we defend everything that we value. People forget this. And if a new technology emerges, if a new one of these emerges, banning it is not an option. You can't ban your adversary from using this, right? So when Orban the engineer creates cannons, he was the guy that invented this. He figured out how to iron cast cylinder, fill one end with gunpowder, fill another end with a bullet. He takes that technology to Constantinople and he offers to build it to Constantine. Constantine turns him down, says he can't afford it. You see the logical flaw there?
Correct.
Because Orban goes to a 19-year-old kid, the Sultan Mahmud, and within a year, they're shooting down the walls of Constantinople. You don't get the option, right? You have to buy it. If you can't afford the cannon, you buy Orban. You buy von Braun. Okay, so this technology has multiple shelling points in history. We use it for warfare. We devise mechanisms so that people pay fees to other people to wield this technology on their behalf.
Correct.
And that's precisely what we're doing with this technology. People who buy Bitcoin are subsidizing the development of a new weapon system, a new defense industrial complex. And which one do you think is more ethical?
Well, definitely the Bitcoin mining. The digital protection of property rights is not only more ethical, but it's also, I would argue, much more effective in achieving world peace. Because at the end of the day, you end up actually knowing with almost a high degree of certainty, or actually with a high degree of certainty, it is impossible to penetrate versus as we are watching right now in certain areas of the world, some people are confused as to you can use the gun and those types of weapons. And there's a question. Can we actually overpower another region, another army, another kind of citizenry? And when you get into the digital world, you know that it can't be penetrated.
In every way that you look at this technology, what is the current conversation doesn't make sense. What is being discussed at the national strategic level is incongruent to what this technology is and what it represents. Obviously, the thing that projects more power, the defense technology that uses more energy, is a better defense system. Obviously, the technology that can preserve citizens' private property rights without spilling blood, without the unfortunate side effects of this, is more ethical. And obviously, trying to ban this from your country is only going to give your adversary an advantage over you. Read history. Read what happened when Whitehead invented the torpedo, and the Royal Navy, the powerful Navy, turned him down and said, I'm not going to invest in this technology because it represents a threat to my naval hegemony. You don't get the option not to turn where this technology takes you.
Hey, you, did you like this video? Great. We make 5 of them a day and post them here on this channel. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, and see you next time.